Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, uh, Jan. Thank you. Thank you kindly. Thanks to all our readers. We appreciate you. And I especially welcoming to our new members. Thank you very much. Uh, we have come to the point that we will be able to appreciate what's in store for us. And this will be coming from our very own Ann Klaeysen, uh, Dr. Ann Klaeysen. I appreciate this effort very much because Ann is very, very dedicated to and supportive of us. She's been this for a long time. As a matter of fact, uh, when I first came to ethical culture, she was responsible for introducing me to the 8 commitments. And since then, of course, I've been committed and I've been appreciative for her friendship. Ann Klaeysen is leader in retirement from the New York Society and recently retired from her positions at the Humanist as the Humanist chaplain on the campuses of Columbia University, New York University. Also, she is vice president of the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture, co-chairs at the Encampment for Citizenship, serves on the board of ethical culture for fields and schools, and is the American Humanist Association and Advisory Committee, and holds a doctorate in ministry, a degree in pastoral counseling from the Hebrew College, Union College, master's degrees in German from SUNY Albany, and business administration from NYU. She and her husband, Glenn, raised their children, Andrew and Emily, here at the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture. We are so appreciative to Ann and for newcomers having children, having seeds, what I call seeds of greatness, and they grow here in our ethical Sunday school. So our ethical, for our ethical program for children. So I welcome and thank you, Ann Klaeysen.
Thank you, Rita. And it's so good to see all of you this morning. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. Great. Okay. So Audrey Kindred and I co-wrote an online course for the American Humanist Association Center for Education. So I'm going to give you a preview of that this morning, and we'll put in the chat later a link, information about this Tuesday evening at 6:30. We'll have a webinar with the AHA. I know some of you will be at a workshop that we're giving at the Brooklyn Society. Unfortunately, there was a scheduling conflict, but you'll get a little preview this morning. So Audrey is the Ethics for Children Director at the New York Society, and I brought her in to work there when I was the clergy leader. And together we worked on so many ceremonies and programs. And so when the opportunity came to write an online course, I, of course, immediately thought of Audrey, and the two of us worked on this together. So let me give you a little bit of background on it. This course, as you can see from this slide, aims to intentionally breathe life and choice into rituals and ceremonies so that we understand the stories they tell and the values they preserve. The process is collaborative and inclusive, as well as being simultaneously reflective and inventive. Families and communities are formed and they grow by births, adoptions, marriages, And many of these experiences are worth recognizing and celebrating. Some celebrations are once in a lifetime, others are annual, and others just sort of have this regular acknowledgement and reflection. So this is all a prelude to if you're looking for kind of a cookie cutter course for ceremonies, that's not what this is. What we're looking to do is to sort of meet people where they are, wherever that is, and ask them to think about collaboratively with their families, with their groups. It could be a family, it could be a school group, it could be a congregation. What are your values? What do you want to lift up? What would you like to celebrate? And how would you like to do that? And I think so often we find ourselves in a very traditional setting. For example, looking around my house, I have it decorated right now for Hanukkah and Christmas. I have some cousins who are visiting from my hometown. We're going to be doing some very traditional things this month. But there's also opportunities for us to do some non-traditional things, and not just seasonally, but every day. I'm going to scroll ahead, and here we go. So we do look at some of these opportunities, some of the celebrating, as you see, from life to death, and we include this in the online course. So for example, baby showers, child welcomings, coming of age, accomplishments, marriages, also uncouplings. I think, what we do here that I think is important and maybe isn't covered other places is that as much as people come together, very often people come apart and there's some uncoupling. So we dedicate part of this course to divorces. What kind of impact does that have on a child, on the family? Are there ways that we can acknowledge it and recognize it? Also, loving care in illness. There's a wise women section. Also, I can tell you that we do a lot with the sidebars in this course, and I'll show you a little bit later, so you'll see what I'm talking about. Because as Audrey and I were working on it, it kept expanding, and we wanted to add more and more to it, and recognize that we really couldn't. But what we could do with the beauty of technology was to put a lot of information into sidebars. And so you can click there and you can see from different cultures, from different organizations. For example, for baby namings, you can click on a PDF where I put together a baby naming ceremony. So it's really rich with a lot of resources. We also address transgender and non-binary namings. So as I mentioned, you'll see a PDF, which is a baby naming ceremony. And that's very traditional. Non-traditional in as much as it's humanist, but traditional in as much as we welcome children, babies into families. But we wanted to acknowledge that for many people, we need to acknowledge a renaming. If you have a transgender person in your family, acknowledge that with a renaming ceremony. So we have a whole chapter in here on pronouns. And part of that is because we realize that in families, that can be stressful. And it can be, people really need to get support and help in understanding that. I mentioned stress because throughout the course, we acknowledge that sometimes stress comes into families, sometimes it comes into putting together a ceremony. How do we do it? So we want to acknowledge that and give folks an opportunity to say, yeah, this is kind of stressful. I'm having a little difficulty with it. How can we handle it? So again, not just a cookie cutter course on how to do a ceremony, but acknowledging all the emotions that might go along with it. Of course, we also cover milestone birthdays, pre-death fare thee wells. More people, especially those who may have an illness and sort of be aware of an end of life, are having a pre-death memorial, inviting family and friends into their homes, into other spaces to say things that maybe we wish we had said while the person was alive, things that we wish that person could hear. So we want to include that as well. And of course, memorials and funerals. I also want to let you know that there are other courses that the American Humanist Association Center for Education offers. So this particular online course is free, but if you like it, and we hope you do, there are other courses that you can take, and there's some charge for tuition on that. For example, how to officiate a wedding, how to do a memorial or a funeral. So you can have opportunities to dig into that a little bit more. I'm going to scroll to the next one. So in addition to these different ceremonies, traditional or non-traditional, we encourage families to be creative and take a look at every day. So this is kind of a fun thing that we put together for families, especially families with younger children. Think about a meatless Monday. Intentionally not eating meat if your family is not already vegetarian or vegan. Tidy Tuesday, a time to clean up together. What's Up Wednesday, a day to check in personally, maybe see what's in the news. My husband often reminds us around his family table at dinner time, the conversation usually was around the headlines in the New York Times. What do you want to talk about? So maybe not that, but something about what's happening with you. What's up? A Tasty Thursday, maybe a time to check a new recipe, taste a new cuisine. I remember in terms of new cuisines, my daughter and I were in a mother-daughter book group for many years, and we would often try to develop a recipe for the dinner that night would be a cuisine that would match with the book that we were reading. So again, kind of creative, fun things that you can do with your family, with your group, with your congregation, with your community. Fridays for the Future, a day to learn about and stand up for climate justice. I like this one, Satisfying Saturday, a day to create something special, unique plans to meet your needs. And of course, a Soothing Sunday. In some traditions, it's called a Sabbath, a day to nourish and enrich your inner life. So these are just some suggestions that we offer in the course, different ways to kind of open up these different opportunities for recognition, acknowledgement, and celebration. And thank you, Rita, for mentioning 8 commitments of ethical culture. In addition to that, the American Humanist Association has what they call 10 commitments. And so here's some examples of how one might take a look at the whole year. For example, January, peace and just social justice. February, empathy or fairness. I'm not going to read through the whole list. You can see it here. But just ways of acknowledging and recognizing different things that we can do throughout the year, in addition to what may be some traditional recognitions or acknowledgements or holidays. I love the Dancing December, for example. Outgoing October, because October is also Pride Month in addition to June. So these are to give you some ideas of how we were connecting the humanist commitments to different times of the year. And what we also do in this course is connecting it so that we can reflect our values. So throughout the course, as many of you know, I love poetry. I think that's the liturgy of ethical humanism. So I often use that. And so we use quite a bit of poetry in our course. Also, referring back to the sidebars, a lot of children's literature. So you will find that in the sometimes in the sidebars we'll have books on certain topics. For example, I mentioned divorce earlier. So in the sidebar, you will find different books for children about divorce. Also about death. You know, we cover that, and we have some books there that are good for children to read about death. I remember when I was the clergy leader at the Long Island Society, we had a chapter with our Ethics for Children program on death. And the reason we did that is our parents came to us and they said, you know, we don't have any trouble talking to our children about sex, but we have a real problem talking to our children about death. And we would really appreciate it if you could cover that in Ethics for Children. So that's what Devorah Weinman and I did at one season at the Long Island Society. And so Audrey and I recognized that we needed to include that in this course as well. We also address heroes and heroines. And what a wonderful opportunity, whether it's at the dinner table or a special day that you set aside, or maybe with your community or a school group, identifying different heroes and heroines, and some of the non-traditional ones. And also thinking about who are everyday heroes and heroines. Often in the playground, children will see something happening there and recognize that a bit of courage was displayed. Highlight that in your family. Talk about that. Recognize that a hero or a heroine is someone who shows moral courage, sometimes under difficult situations. Also recognizing momentous legislation. And although it's not really legislation, it's a declaration, I want to call attention that today, December 10th, is a World Human Rights Day. The United Nations Declaration of Human Rights was put into action 75 years ago. So what a wonderful opportunity for us to reflect our values in recognizing that. And as you might imagine, we do a lot in this course around nature, and not just Earth Day. We also look at how can we green, putting green in air quotes here, different holidays. And in the online course, we specifically look at Halloween, for example. How can we green that in terms of children making their own costumes and not buying them from a store? How can we look at these holidays that are traditional in the winter season of cultivating generosity and grace and all the giving, and not necessarily literally buying into the commercialized gift buying and giving. We also take a look at nurturers. Obviously, we know of Mother's Day, Father's Day, Children's Day, Grandparents' Day. We expand that here and say, let's look at all nurturers. Mother's Day, for example, was initially started as International Peace Day. So looking at the history of Mother's Day, looking at Father's Day and saying, well, who are the other nurturers in our lives and how can we recognize them? So you'll notice that we kind of break open and try to expand some of the more traditional holidays. So looking at Nurturers Day. And then sort of looking at philosophy, certainly framing it with a humanist philosophy, but also understanding that there are different philosophies throughout the world, philosophies and religions, Buddhism, Taoism, all kinds of things that we can bring into, and again, not co-opting these, but recognizing them and giving credit to them. And of course, science is always a good thing to celebrate and to recognize, whether it's about climate change or Darwin Day, all the different ways that we can look at science and sort of lift that up for our children and celebrate it, recognize it. And of course, social justice. In fact, we have a section in the online course about how to go on protest marches with your children. One of my best Mother's Day gifts was a trip to Washington, D.C. With my family, because it was all about peace and gun control. And it was just a lovely way to celebrate with my family, going to a rally and a march in DC, or whether it's a climate change march or peace march, just ways. So you'll notice that in the online course, we talk about bringing our children with us and making that a family tradition, and also keeping them safe and understanding, what are the limitations on different marches and rallies. And of course, now we are in the time of winter solstice, which is a very favorite time for many humanists. So we look at the equinoxes and solstices as kind of a particularly humanist way of celebrating this time of year. And I'm just going to read this to you because I like the way that Audrey phrased this for us in the course. Many cultures have celebrations that center around light. They often take place in the darkest seasons. Sometimes darkness, in contrast to light, gets a bad rap and metaphorically gets pushed into realms of fear and negativity. Indeed, darkness is beautiful, rich, and essential to all growth and development. Seeds germinate in the darkness of the ground. Stars shine in the darkness of the sky, even though they were always there. Dreams flourish in the darkness of sleep. Darkness restores us. It unbounds the imagination. So kind of looking at the solstice times, here's an example of kind of reframing darkness as being very, very nurturing and very rich and essential to all growth. And this I really love. This is kind of a way for you to be thinking about how we can humanize holidays, and using this practice of the traffic light, red, yellow, and green. So it's about being intentional in our choices to be inclusive, socially aware, environmentally conscious, and creative. So this is a traffic method. So stop, red, means stop and recommit to a no harm measurement and let go of harmful practices. So I mentioned before that we kind of dig in a little bit in the course to Halloween, with regard to not buying a ready-made costume in a store, but making something, and recycling some things. This holiday season that we're in now, thinking about a no harm would be, thinking about what kind of decorations you have. Handmade is always wonderful because something we can do together. It has more meaning for us. So sort of stopping things that are harmful and letting go of those harmful practices. The yellow is slow down and listen and review the holiday that you're revolutionizing. So you get some of our philosophy here. We're looking into revolutionizing some of the more traditional and commercial holidays. So it's just kind of, taking that moment to think about it. And then green is like go for it. I've got this new thing. We decided that all of our gifts this season are going to be handmade. In my family, for example, for years now, because as adults, we really don't need anything. And what we want, we can often get for ourselves. We let each other know, which charitable organizations we really value. So, for example, my family knows they're going to give to the Encampment for Citizenship. That's one of my favorite charities. And so they all know that. And for my siblings and cousins, they let me know what are their favorite charities, what are their favorite organizations. So I'm going to give to them. So green, go, because this is something that you can really move forward on and everyone can be on the same page. So I did sort of different examples here of this season. Our winter solstice, of course, I don't know how many of you do Festivus for the rest of us. That's kind of a joke from the Seinfeld show. Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and New Year's. I'm going to stop here for a moment because that's the poem I want to read to you at the end. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm now going to show you a little bit of the course so that you can see what it actually looks like. And here we go. Okay, so this is one of the pages from the actual course. And let me just tell you, we've got a long table of contents here. We try to cover laying the groundwork for authenticity and peace, infusing daily practices with humanist values. This is some of the items from our table of contents. Celebrating the spiral of life occasions, unique milestones, embedding humanist values in your own calendar, and then embedding nature-based values in your calendar. And then at the end, we have a humanist guide to popular cultural holidays. I selected this particular page to talk with you a little bit this morning because it's one of my favorite. When Audrey and I started working on this course together and knew that we were going to do something a little different. In other words, as I had said before, instead of saying, here's this celebration, here's how you do it, here's a draft for this ceremony, we really wanted to go back in terms of looking at values, the core values of the group or the family. And so early on, this was one of my favorite things because we're taking what we call taking stock questions. And I'm sharing that with us this morning because BSEC is now involved and participating in a series of workshops facilitated by organizational consultants. And we're really taking stock of ourselves as a community. So I think these might be helpful for us. And they're also helpful for any particular group. And we want to acknowledge that families, are collective, and at their best, they're collaborative, and they take myriad forms. And I think that's, again, within a humanist framework, that recognition that families take all these different forms. And most important thing is that we provide that loving home, that quotation that Jana read from Felix Adler. The family providing that nest, that loving place of support and love. And humans learn about themselves as they connect with the families and with this mindful intention. So early on in the course, we have these taking stock questions. And it's kind of a tilling of that personal soil and a planting of seeds. And so here are some examples. And I'm just going to run by them somewhat quickly, but I think you'll recognize in the work that we've been doing at BSEC, why these are important. Naming 3 core words that express the vision and values your family strives to uphold. And how often do we say these words? How often are they read? Is it something that we do at the dinner table? I grew up in a Catholic family, and we said a grace before meals. And we gave thanks for the food, but we also brought a deity into it. Maybe this is something where you can say these are the core values of our family, and we're going to mention them at every meal. How do we check in with family members' feelings and emotions? Do we have time for intentional listening and dialogue? Kids are in school, parents have jobs, sometimes they're working remotely, sometimes they're commuting to an office. We're all rushing around. We want to remind folks that we're not always humans doing, we're also human beings. And so how are we with one another? This is a good one too. How do we approach problem solving? Obviously, parents take responsibility for younger people, the children in their family, and they have authority, but is it authoritarian or is it cooperative? And then how do we play together? We put a lot of attention in this course on playing because play is so creative. And when you are putting together a ceremony, play is so important in that because if you enter into the play, you're very creative and you can come up with ceremonies together. If the walls could talk, what are the walls of your home saying? And so I'm thinking about Fiona telling us about our new space that we're moving into and how she and Damon are really preparing that space for us with the paint on the walls and the carpet and everything. We want to be thinking about that space. What are the walls of our congregational home saying to people who come in? We've been talking a lot about welcoming. What pictures on the wall or artwork will be welcoming to folks and give a message of who we are? Identifying some of those traditional aspects for the different branches of our family tree and incorporating them. Thinking about who our shared heroes are. Many people in our families may be heroes or heroines to us. Do we tell those stories to our children? Do we encourage them to tell their own stories? And then what are our favorite annual celebrations? What humanitarian or environmental causes do we support?
This is Dad.
And then what yearns for healing in your family? We really get a lot, as I mentioned before, we talk about stress in the family. We also talk about what needs healing. And I think this is an important point because There are elephants who roam the earth and they're in the room, they're in our families. And so how can we acknowledge if there's some suffering or some healing that needs to take place? Can we address that? And I know there's sometimes a discomfort around that, or maybe a lack of understanding about communication. But we can do that. They can be challenging, but we can be creative. And then finally, how might our family be already designing their own solutions? So this is a kind of an inventory that's early on in the course that I think I always enjoy, and I like to go back to that. I'm just going to give you a quick example as I move to the next topic to show you just the mechanics of how this course works. So here's creating projects to engage your family and group. Oops, I keep doing this. There we go. There we go. And so this is an example of what I mentioned before about the sidebar. So this is, again, early on in the course where we're kind of setting it up for you. But you'll see in the sidebar children's books that show that all families are different. So I really like dig into the sidebars. We even have some videos that you can look at. Okay, just quickly, one more example from the course. This is the core values. And so the core values, we also give some examples of nonviolent communication resources for kids and for working with kids. So you'll see, check out the hyperlinks that you can click on, check on the sidebars. There's just a lot going on there. Okay. All righty. And I'm winding down and we'll get ready for the Q&A in just a moment. I just want to close it out with something. Here we go. So I just gave you a very quick rundown of the course. And we will have more information on Tuesday evening if you're available for the AHA webinar. And I hope that you will check it out. As I said, the online course is free. And you can zip through it, or you can go through it little by little and keep a little journal on the side. It was a joy to write with Audrey Kindred because we've worked together for so many years on ethics for children's programming. And I hope that you enjoy it. So this is my closing poem, Perhaps the World Ends Here, by Joy Harjo, from Reinventing the Enemy's Language. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. At this table, we gossip, recall enemies and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor falling down selves, and as we put ourselves back together once again at the table. This table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. So whatever tables you are at today and the rest of the week, the year, I wish you well, and I thank you very much for allowing me to give you this sneak peek.